Hello all, welcome to Oracle Cloud ERP Technical Trainings. In this session, we'll try to have an overview of web services which are available in Oracle Cloud and how can we test the sample web service and we using which tools. Let's get into outline. We'll try to understand what are the different types of web services which are available and how do you identify a particular web service as SOAP or a REST. How do you invoke a SOAP REST web services or SOAP or REST web services using different tools which are available. And we are not getting into detail of designing and integration, but we are just trying to understand how do we observe, how do you find out availability of a particular web service, and how do we invoke those using some testing tools. Okay, generally we call this particular SOAP UI or Postman or curl as a testing tools for the web services. We are not designing an end-to-end integration, because to design an end-to-end integration you require a, a middleware, like it can be a Dell Boomi or OIC, or it can be MuleSoft, Jitterbit, the lot number of middlewares which are available in the market. So what exactly a web service is? A web service is a functionality which is available over the internet to communicate between two different heterogeneous network, right? So web service can be technically implemented in any language, but any other language can invoke that particular web service. I mean to say, let us say, assume that you have a web service functionality which is available, and you can invoke that particular web service using a PL/SQL program or using a C language program, using a Python program, using a Java program, using a Perl program. So using different languages, you can invoke a web service. A web service can be implemented, nothing but like how exactly web service is designed, right? Maybe if you come from a technical background. So I'm saying that you have a web service. Web service provides a particular functionality, but how technical it is implemented. Web service is a functionality which is implemented using one of the programming languages. It can be a C language, it can be Java language, it can be a .NET language, it can be a number of languages which have the capability to design web services, and vice versa. Also, we have a different set of languages which are having a capability to invoke a web service also. So, in simple example, I can say you like you can expose a PL/SQL program as a web service also. Okay, so in general, there are two types of web services approach which are available. We call it as SOAP as well as REST. So technically, the functionality of a SOAP or a REST, it is almost same, but the way it communicates, or like the payload and the security, and there are some other things which are different in the SOAP as well as REST. So earlier, like maybe 5 years back, SOAP was much famous, but so now the current scenario, REST is one of the famous web service approach which we generally use it. Okay, so the major difference between a SOAP and a REST is like the payload differences, and the capability of the size of the payload differs, and security wise more or less both are same. It has both have a similar kind of security mechanisms. So to understand SOAP stands for Simple Object Access Protocol, where you require the input to be passed to the web service in an XML format. So coming to the REST, representative state transfer, it provides these set of functionalities. So in SOAP web services, you will not have any specific, like when you invoke a web service, right? So you just need to understand which method you want to invoke. But in REST web services, we have to mention which particular, like we have to mention the method name also, like whether you want to invoke in a post, whether you want to invoke the REST web service using the post method or a get method, put method, delete method, or patch method. So we have post is for the purpose of like creating a new data, get is for the purpose of extracting the data, and put is to update, and patch also similar to update, but it can update only partial data, and delete is for the purpose of deleting the data. So what I'm trying to, what like in this session, what we try to understand is like we'll try to see in real world. Let us say if you want to work on integration, the first and foremost important thing what you try to do is like what is your entity? Nothing but what is the functionality you want to achieve using a web service? Whether you want to create a supplier, you want to create a journal, you want to create a AP invoice or AR invoice, whether you want to create a project or a contract, right? So now how generally happens in any of the project is first of all you will try to understand like in front end where exactly it is available, right? You'll just try to understand the navigation so that it will help you for you to like create some sample one, or to validate whether what you have created is correct or not. So in our example, it is a very simple example I'm choosing. So I'm trying to create a supplier. So I have navigated to supplier screen, and I have a task called create supplier. I just clicked on it, and it shows the mandatory fields are only three things here: supplier name, business relationship, as well as tax organization type. So using UI, nothing but user interface, I'm just creating a supplier like this. And always try to understand when you are creating any data, always try to validate from the BI, from the BI publisher also. So it is not required, but it will help you out, like designing the end-to-end solution, designing a recon reports, reconciliation reports, or designing, like a validation reports. If you want to, let us say, if someone want to understand, like you're telling that you created a supplier, but how can they validate, right? So they want to validate how exactly the data is available in a system. So that is the reason generally we design BI reports for the purpose of reconciliation. And using BI, you can validate. And now we'll try to understand, yes, like from UI, we are able to create a supplier. And now using SOAP UI, how can we create a supplier using the SOAP web service, right? So this particular functionality is applicable to any kind of web service in Oracle Cloud ERP, right? So like whenever you get a requirement, in our session, we are only discussing about supplier, but you can consider this as a generic approach for any kind of entity. But it can be a journal, it can be a contract, it can be a project. Okay, so first of all, identify your requirement and find out the navigation or the WSDL details of your web service. So like here, if I have provided the link for the supplier, and similarly you can get the link for the any other web services, and you need to get your cloud instance URL. And after that, so in the Oracle Cloud, in this particular Oracle website, they clearly mention like what is a WSDL you have to invoke, right? So generally by default, Oracle provides a link like this: HTTPS followed by server name followed by the appropriate the navigation of the WSDL. So we have to replace this server name with your cloud instance URL. So the final WSDL URL will be like this, right? So this is how we have to construct the URL first before going further. Now let's get to next slide. Once you have constructed the URL based on your cloud instance as well as the documentation provided by Oracle, just open that particular WSDL URL in the browser, any browser. I prefer Chrome. Okay, open the Chrome browser, and if it provides some XML content, it means that the WSDL which you want to invoke, the URL of WSDL is correct. We are not actually invoking the WSDL as of now. We are just validating with this URL of the WSDL is correct or not. Okay, WSDL stands for Web Service Description Language. Now, once you have the WSDL URL, what you can do is you can install this particular software called SOAP UI. It is a free tool, and you just mention, like, click on SOAP, and you mention the project name, mention the WSDL URL, and just click on OK. It will take some time to load the list of methods which are available in this WSDL. Now it shows the list of methods which are available, and I just clicked on suppliers SOAP HTTP. Click on request. Now it will provide you a large number of information. So one more problem with any of the web services, you will have a large number of fields which may be not required really in any of the real projects also. But Oracle provides good amount of fields which may require. So what we can do is always make use of the Metalink website and find out if Oracle is providing any sample payloads. So this input what we are passing to the web service, we call it as payload. Okay, so now we just now saw that from the UI to create a supplier we just require only 3 fields, right? But Oracle has provided a large number of optional fields. It may be required in future scenarios, like maybe based on your complexity of your project. So in our case we just require only 3 fields. So what I'm doing is I'm just passing only few fields, like supplier name, tax organization, business relationship, right? And also to invoke a web service, right, you need to mention the authentication as well as the username token also. So let me try to open my SOAP UI. Yeah, so once you click on this particular green icon, so the web service will get invoked, and you can just click on raw, and you can find out whether the status of your web service response is okay or not. If it is 200, it means that this web service response is okay, nothing but you're able to successfully invoke your web service. And you can click on XML and to see the response what it is providing for your XML. And also make sure that for your user, when you're invoking a web service, make sure that you have the proper role to invoke, because it is totally role-based access in Oracle Cloud ERP. So you have to clearly validate whether you have the appropriate role or not to invoke a web service, right? So this is how we invoke. Sorry, 1 minute. Yep. Yeah, this is how we invoke the SOAP web service. You can again you can validate the information using our BI tool. Okay. So that's the reason this is one of the benefit to have a report like a design when you are working with the web services or even conversion also. Now, how do you invoke a similar web service using REST, right? Similar, I mean to say, like, how do we invoke a REST web services using the tools, using different tools. We have two tools which are available. One is SOAP UI as well as Postman. So yeah, so this is how you identify what is the URL of your REST web service. And now here, if you observe, right, so in Oracle has provided the information only like this, /FSCM REST API followed by resource or something like this. And it is like the content which is there in the flower braces is nothing but a parameter you need to pass it to invoke this particular REST web services. So here, final URL to invoke REST web service, if you observe here, right, what I have done is I have prefixed my Oracle Cloud URL followed by the FCM REST API resources followed by, finally, I'm just passing the supplier ID, right? So how do I get supplier ID? So again, the BI is only tool using which you can get the information about your internal fields values, right? So now, so here I am able to get what is my supplier ID, nothing but vendor ID. And once I have the information, I can go to, again, the SOAP tool, click on REST, and like you just mentioned the URL. Here, if you observe, I mentioned the URL, click on the screen icon, and it will get invoked, right? So this is authentication. Whenever you're working on a SOAP or a REST, make sure that click on authentication tab, and it will ask you to mention the username, password, okay? And now here, if you observe, the response which I'm getting from the SOAP UI is 4004, not found. So I'm not sure whether it's a tool issue or a web service issue, but it was not working for me in the SOAP UI. What I've done is I used Postman client. This is one of the testing tool for the purpose of REST web services. I just mentioned my URL, and again, you have an authorization, click on authorization, mention the username, password, and click on send. It will provide you the response. Okay, so here I was able to invoke it successfully. And final, one more tool what we have is curl. Okay, so this is one of the what you say, a command based utility to invoke a web service, right? It's similar one. So what is the difference here is we have a command followed by username, password, and followed by the total REST web service URL. This is generally used for the purpose of, it works only for REST web services, right? So here also we are able to successfully invoke the web service. So these are the tools, all are free, okay? And this is one of the very important one, OER, nothing but Oracle Enterprise Repository, which will have the information about tables, web services, FBDIs, and even the implementation information like which module and how the process works in a particular module. So happy learning. Thank you.